Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Cobots in Canada, a Canadian perspective on collaborative robots. I'm Christina Urquhart, editor at Annex Business Media, Canada's largest B2B media company, and I'm here as your host on behalf of Manufacturing Automation. Before I introduce today's moderator, who's with me today, Jim Beretta, I have a few housekeeping details to go through. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Universal Robots, for their participation today and their help in making this webinar possible. To our audience, you've joined us for the first in a series of 3 webinars that Manufacturing Automation and Universal Robots are presenting on Cobots in Canada. Today, we're talking about use cases in Western Canada, and we will give you more details on the other 2 upcoming events at the end of today's webinar. If you're watching along with us, the audience is in listen-only mode. We will first hear a presentation on Cobots from Jim, and then he'll lead us through a panel discussion with 2 end users. We have JS Foster Corporation, we have Bryce Flug, General Manager, with us, as well as Skeens Pneumatic and Automation, and we have Chad Skeens, President, and Matt White, Applications Specialist, with us today. We'll be taking questions throughout the discussion in anticipation of a 10-minute Q&A period at the end, so feel free to drop a question at any time using the Q&A button on your Zoom window. If we don't have enough time to get to your question, we'll follow up by email. We are recording today's session, and everyone who registered will get an email with a link to the recording in the next few days. With that, I would like to welcome our moderator for today. Jim Beretta is a tour de force in the Canadian automation world. He is president of Customer Attraction, an industrial marketing consultancy, and host of the Robot Industry podcast. Jim works with companies in robotics, automation, manufacturing, packaging, and capital equipment on their branding, marketing, and search engine strategies. He attended the University of Western Ontario and is based in Cambridge, Ontario, which is where he's joining us from today. Thank you for being here, Jim, and I'm going to pass the floor over to you.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you for that warm introduction. I'm going to share my screen and I'll walk through the PowerPoint. So I'm very excited to be with you today to talk more about collaborative robots in Canada. And just going to get my slideshow set up. So this is me, and I've been involved in the robot industry for quite a while, and again, and also the podcaster at Robot Industry Podcast. So today's presentation is meant to be interactive. We're going to start with kind of the why and types of automation for some of the people out there that may not be used to automation or maybe kind of thinking about automation. As I mentioned, we have an expert panel today and Q&A towards the end of the presentation. So one of the big questions is why automation? And automation is kind of divided into a couple different groups. So you have hard automation, you have lean automation, and you have flexible automation. And today we're beginning talking a lot about flexible automation. But here are some of the reasons that you might want to consider automation. And I think that collaborative automation especially is great for the Canadian market. It's all of these reasons that you see on the screen. And one of the conversations that I'm having recently with a lot of clients and in the industry is about attracting and retaining labor. And we're going to talk about this as a kind of a current theme through the presentation.
Hi, Jim. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to let you know that your view, we're seeing the notes screen. So if you just want to change to slideshow, we should all be able to see the slide.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm seeing the other one, so I am.
If you just go to swap, maybe swap displays, it could be that.
Swap displays is how we're going to do this.
Yes, thank you, perfect.
Great, so we're going to skip ahead a couple of slides. And this next slide that I'm going to show you. So the slide on the left, and this slide's about incremental automation. And it takes a long time to design, plan, and debug and ramp hard automation. It takes a long time to design it. It takes a long time to install it. So that's the slide on the left. The slide on the right is showing lean automation or collaborative automation. And these are pictures of robots that are loading CNC machines. And the one at the bottom, it looks like it's doing a material handling job. And when we're talking about incremental automation, the interesting thing about collaborative technologies is that it's very simple to add more automation. So you just add it when you need it. If you have another CNC machine, you can add another collaborative robot. And this is in days and weeks, not months and months, which is on the left-hand side of your screen. So here's 2 examples of collaborative automation. On the left-hand side are Universal Robots robots. So they're the sponsor today. They're simple, they're elegant, they're easy to use, and they're divided usually by reach and by weight. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're seeing another example of collaborative automation. It's called a MER collaborative robot. It's autonomous, meaning that it moves on its own. It knows its surroundings. It can navigate, say, a person or a forklift in front of it. If the robots ever bump into people, they stop and they slow down, and you reset them so that they can go on their way and do the rest of the tasks that they're meant to do. One of the very interesting statistics of late is that robots and people actually work better together. And you may have seen Elon Musk or heard of Elon Musk in one of his Tesla factories actually pulling out automation because he put in too much automation. So the number that I want you to take away from this is from an MIT research data about how collaborative robots are 85% more productive than just robots or humans alone. So to me, the value proposition of collaborative technology is speed. So it's time to market, time to install. You can use it in a do-it-yourself environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. You have plug and play peripherals that are already pre-authorized. You have less guarding and less training. And as we talk through the webinar today, you'll be able to see how this is a real advantage for small, medium enterprises in manufacturing and distribution and material handling. One of the interesting things about collaborative technologies, and UR is by far the leader in all the collaborative robot technologies with over 50,000 robots shipped, and that actually numbers from a while ago, so I'm kind of assuming it's a little higher. So they have approximately 50 to 60% of the market share, depending on when you're talking to them. But they're in almost every industry, and it's hard to think of an application that a cobot isn't able to do. So here's some of the kind of things to think about when we're thinking about robots 101 with collaborative robots. So they're safe, and they're intrinsically safe so that you can work beside them. They're easy to program. So what's kind of interesting we're seeing in the industry is that cobots, when installed, you take your operator and your operator turns into maybe a robot programmer. So they're able to not do the dull and dangerous and drudgery work that robots are meant to do. They actually become an owner of the process and learn a very valuable skill. They're fast setup, so it's 120 volt power. So it's simply out of the box. You can plug it in and start working with your robot right away. One of the big drivers behind collaborative robots is when you compare collaborative robots to industrial robots, is there a third to half the price of traditional hard automation. Now, they work a little bit slower because they're collaborative, but they won't hurt you, which is a big advantage. And I want to as well introduce to the audience today the whole concept of robots as a tool. So collaborative robots are the low-hanging fruit of collaborative robots tend to be in machine shops, tend to be in metal fabricators, tend to be in loading and unloading machine tools. But we're seeing more and more where collaborative robots are being rolled out to factories and in many different ways. And some of these are robots as a service, or as the bottom right-hand picture you can see is a Vectus robot. They're one of the solutions providers that's part of the UR Plus store, which is like the app store, where they're making a complete kit so you can get up and going right away. The last thing I wanted to do before I introduce our experts today is talk a little bit about the looming labor crisis that we have in North America, and especially in Canada. This is coming from CBC, where manufacturers are desperate to have people sign up for jobs. So in this picture on the left-hand side of your screen, they're actually sign-up bonuses now, which we haven't seen in a long time for workers. And on the right-hand side of the screen is something that came up on my LinkedIn, which I thought was an interesting comment. And the question here is, do you plan to quit your job instead of returning to the office? So, you know, when we go from working from home and when your employer calls and says, no, I want you to come to the office, I believe that there's going to be, and from this very informal poll, which went to, I think, 1,000 votes, you know, there's a percentage of the population who are just not going back to work. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I'll introduce a couple of case stories in just a moment before I get to our experts. So Ethelx is a shelf manufacturer in Quebec, and I'll roll a video in just a moment, but we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that Ethelx had when they installed a collaborative robot, and that's a brake press behind it, which is a very dangerous machine because it doesn't stop for anything, and it's a perfect application for a collaborative robot. This is JS Foster, or Islander Reels, and we're really happy to have Bryce here today to talk a little bit about the application here. This is a fishing reel used typically for salmon fishing, and we'll be able to talk a little bit about how Islander Reels was able to do a do-it-yourself robot. So I don't think, and Bryce will be here in a minute, I don't think they used any integrators or anything. They just did this robot themselves using a plug and play end of arm tool, which is called Robotique, which you can see on the left-hand side. It's a dual end effector, and are very successful in their applications of the UR collaborative robot. And the last is Paradigm Speakers in Toronto. Paradigm was looking for an application where they could do sanding and finishing, reduce their labor, and allow their workers to do higher order tasks. And all of these summaries are on the Universal Robots website. And the last is a Canadian technology producer of surgical tools, and they've actually implemented a UR cobot in their tools so that they can hold the microscope for surgery. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of things in Canada with Universal Robots and Universal Robot technologies. So I'd like to introduce Matt White. He's the application specialist for Skeens Pneumatic and Automation Solutions. He's been working in the industry for 3 years. He's been evaluating robot applications, sales, service, and training. And he's here to join us, as well as Bruce Flug, who is the general manager of JS Foster. He's the manufacturer of Islander Reels, and his passion is in manufacturing, designing, testing, and kind of fixing systems. This passion started from a pair of startup projects in the mechanical and electrical space. It grew through experience in machining and manufacturing, and has evolved into his current management role, where he designs and implements systems that allow for sustained corporate growth at JS. Bryce has flourished in each of these roles because of a unique combination of technical knowledge, curiosity, problem solving, and interpersonal skills. And we also have, and we're thrilled to have Chad Skeens, president of his family-run business, and he's been operating this business for forever. So welcome to the presentation, everyone. You can turn your cameras on now.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for having Jim.
So I've got a bunch of questions for you, and my first one is, why are cobots a good fit for Canada? And Matt, maybe you can start.
They're probably a good fit everywhere. One of the nice things that we see with them is they're relatively easy to deploy. They're easy to wrap your head around. Their documentation is quite good. The training's quite good. So it's accessible for lots of people who've never had the exposure with robots. It's also kind of neat in that a lot of the stuff that they provide prior to sale, provide free of service or free of charge. So if somebody's interested in getting involved in this stuff, that you can actually get in and try out a lot of this stuff and work through a lot of the material without actually having to commit to putting a robot in place. And so UR in particular is quite good at having all of this stuff made available. And then once you get a robot, they're really easy to use. The documentation, the training really lines up particularly well with what you're going to see once you get the robot out of the box. And it is really easy to get out of the box and up and running.
And Matt, you know, Canada is kind of a, should I say, medium to low volume, high mix environment. Is that kind of a motivator for a lot of manufacturers?
I think so. The way that I understand it is that the ability to get the robot programmed for different tasks allows you to change in between tasks pretty easily as well. The structure and the format for working through a process, mapping on a process, giving the robot and the tooling, the same robot is made for a variety of different tasks. So the same arm can be used for a palletizing application, can be used for a sanding application, could be used for a machine tending application. And it's the same arm. Software is all the same. Change out your tooling, change out the robot's function, and you can take that same robot and wheel it and do 2 totally different applications the same day.
So that's a real thing, right? Like you can literally take the robot off line 1 for the first shift and move it to line 2 for the second shift. It just plugs into 120 volt and away you go.
Yeah, and it can be as easy as you can get a tool changer for them. So in some cases, the robot can do it automatically. You'll find some case studies where the robot's working with a variety of different tools. It's about a half dozen different tools where the robot drills and dispenses and does assembly tasks. And it can just, with the same gripper that Bryce was using, you can actually reach out, and they made custom tooling for it and custom fittings for each one of these tools that you can just reach out and swap in between. It's pretty versatile.
Bryce will ask, well, I'll get your comment on that same question. Why are cobots good for Canada? You're using it, you installed it yourself. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience.
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously the common misconception is that it's for replacing people, but in our case, it was to allow our people to do other things. It's hard for us to find good people in Western Canada, especially on Vancouver Island. It's a pretty small area. And when we had our people doing something that's repetitive, that's been the same for, we've been doing the same process for over 10 years of loading and unloading these machines, they weren't adding the value that they could be. So for us, that was the big thing, was getting our people who were already trained and good at being, machine setup machinists or operators, and getting them into something that's a little bit more high skill. So, for us, that was the big takeaway, was that once we put this process in, rather than having someone get distracted every 15 minutes and go load a machine, the thing just loaded itself. Now, obviously, there's the productivity increases there overnight and weekends, and really utilizing this, we don't have a lot of space, so utilizing that machine to its full extent was huge for us too. But yeah, definitely just making sure that our people are doing things that are adding the most value for the 40 hours a week that they're at the shop.
And how have the cobots been accepted by the workforce?
Yeah, it was interesting. So, I mean, obviously, there's always that air of this, the robot's kind of freaky or something. But honestly, I mean, we are a CNC machine shop. Everything's a robot already. This just looks a little bit fancier with the arm, but our bar feeders, our gantry loaders, they're very similar. So there wasn't a huge pushback or anything. And actually, the very first night we had it sitting there, we had it bolted to the table, and we said to the guys, "If you want to play with it, feel free." And I came in the next morning, and it was stacking and unstacking 2 blocks that they put on top of each other. And I was like, wow, like that's, these guys had never used one of these. It's crazy. It's like, it's right out of the classic, what they say is going to happen. And it was like, wow, it actually did happen. So I'm really happy we went with something that was so easy to program compared to, some of the industrial robots that we played with before that were just a little bit tougher for sure. So.
That's amazing that you're, 3 or 4 hours in, and all of a sudden the guys are actually working it. So that's wonderful. Matt, I'll go back to you about kind of that acceptance for collaborative robots in Canada. What's your experience working with some of the other clients and prospects that you're talking to?
The comfort level seems to build quickly. Like one of the neat things that I found personally learning it and then showing it to others is the ability to get close to it actually makes it a lot easier to interact with. So you're not standing from across the room and trying to guide something. It's very intuitive.
Yep. So
you build the familiarity and the comfort level very quickly.
And Chad, sorry, that's great news. And Chad, you're with us today, right?
That's correct. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Chad, welcome. And are you finding the same thing about manufacturers in generally knowing about collaborative robots?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a shift in Western Canada, just with automation and everybody's willingness to adapt to new technology. And we've been a distributor of UR for 4 years now, and we're really beginning to notice that shift in mindset and that willingness to adapt and innovate.
And so when you're dealing with your customers, and Matt, I'll go to you too after this, what industries and applications are you seeing? And are there some kind of low-hanging fruit? Obviously, machine loading and unloading is probably one of those that's what Bryce is doing. What do you see for Western Canada?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. The collaborative welding robots that we're seeing right now is definitely big for Western Canada. We do, tend to reside in that heavy industrial space, and the mining, that industry type work. So we're seeing some good traction in the collaborative welding applications. But just a wide variety of, Jim, like there is so much out there. You know, you touched on medical. We also got some applications working through integrators and schemes for some medical applications, but definitely the CNC loading and unloading, and the welding, and then just simple pick and place applications are definitely the bigger ones.
Matt, are you finding that there's a bullseye customer, like maybe 100 employees or 50 employees, that is kind of a thing, people that are most interested in collaborative robots?
The pattern that I've noticed has been having somebody on staff with the inclination and that little bit of extra time to just dive in. And so it's found it to have a harder time finding staff that have a full engineering department or those extra resources, but you don't really need that. So if you have one person who wants to take the evening and learn how to do this stuff, like Bryce was saying, you can play for a couple hours and you're good to go. Finding groups that are able to dive in quickly, so like the demo and actually getting a robot going, can be a relatively short cycle. And because all this stuff is available, you can go fairly quickly. So small groups that are making these decisions seem to have an easier time with it. The demos make it easy to pull a lot of people in.
Yeah.
And I think that level of collaboration in a company makes it a lot easier to get a good application and a good result out of it.
I think it is important to have a champion almost in every facility to say, yes, I'm actually going to take this on. I'm going to be the programmer, or I'd like to be on the programmer team. I'd like to learn how to program robots because it is so simple. Hey, Bryce, we're going to move to you about any of the surprises or something that maybe you didn't anticipate when you installed your UR Cobot. And you've got a UR10, right?
Yeah, we've got a UR10E. Yeah, I mean, the thing that, you know, the way we did the integration and the way we use it, I think surprised us in that, like, we actually have it programmed such that if we want to hand load it, we can hand load it. If we want to use the robot, we can do it. So when we're doing a setup, you know, we switching from part to part, we will actually hand load it like we always have. We just have the robot sitting idle, just stopped, not running its program. And it's integrated with the machine such that there's no difference. There's no difference to the operator. There's no difference to anything. It's just the robot's not coming in there. Now, if we had fencing and guarding and all the traditional, you know, things that we would have to have with an industrial robot, I think that would be a lot harder. And, you know, and if the interface wasn't programmed such that, you know, it would be a little bit more difficult. But that, I think, just even makes it that much more approachable, because now you go hand load one, you get it going, you're happy that thing's running well, so you switch over to the robot program. Nothing's changed. It's just the robot's loading it now instead of a person. And I think that was kind of surprising, because we kind of expected it to be like a completely different way of using this system, but it's not at all.
Thank you for that. So what are some of the steps that you went through when you considered the Cobot solution? I'm really interested, kind of like, you know, you look around your shop and you find a solution that is kind of low-hanging fruit. It's simple. It has a high degree of success. Like, what were some of those steps? Yeah,
sure. I mean, for us, we're a job shop, but we're also an OEM, right? So we make these, you know, this Islander fishing reel brand. So it's always you know, the low-hanging fruit for us is always putting in automation or something to better our own internal brand that we know isn't changing. We have full control over it. Now that we've seen the robot, I would be more comfortable in doing that with some of our customer work too, that, you know, our long-term customers. But at the time, it was definitely like, okay, we want to pick something that's going to be the same for a while. So we chose the fishing reels. Now there's still variability in them. We have probably over 20 different programs that we're going to be loading with that same robot. So far, we've done about 7 of them and done repeat loadings of them. So that was a big thing. But yeah, also, like I said, where were we taking our highest skilled guys and getting them to do the most remedial task? That was you know, our big thing. So in this case, we had some of our longest term people loading this machine, and it was like, okay, this is, and we were only really doing that because they knew the control a little bit better, or they knew something a little bit better. Sometimes we get operators in there, but yeah, that was the low hanging fruit for us, was freeing their time up for sure.
Matt, this question is for you. Kind of what is the process of a safety audit, or maybe it's Chad, either one?
Yeah, so you'd have to look at the entire work cell and the whole process, and then kind of work through it with your whole team, with the safety department at each individual site for each individual cell, and then for each application. So it would involve figuring out what the pieces of equipment would be, what each step in the process would be, and then going through each task, each action, and then trying to determine all possible risks, mapping out the severity of them, the likelihood of them, and then going through the risk assessment and trying to mitigate all of those to an acceptable level. And a collaborative robot out of the box is designed to be safe, but if you throw a knife on the end of it and start swinging it around, that application is no longer collaborative, no longer safe. And so different things can be done. If an application like that, you throw guarding around it, as you'll see in the brake press example, you can throw a light curtain on it and stop all movement. Different ways to mitigate each one of these. And like Robotique has a book that goes through the whole process of taking a collaborative robot application, mapping it all out, working through each one of those steps, the documentation that you want to go through for a Canadian example. And there's a lot of resources like that allow you to go through for each one. And as we were talking, sorry.
I'm sorry.
The same thing for 2 applications in a day. So as we talked about taking the robot from one application in the morning, different application in the afternoon, you do a safety assessment for each one of those. And it just goes with the robot, different tooling, different processes for each.
And who does the robot? Who does the safety assessment? Is it actually the operator, or do you need a third party?
We found it to be the customer with their operators would all go through and kind of do that holistic safety audit on their end. And so it would be owner of the shop, shop manager, operator, anybody interacting with the cell, people loading parts in or around, people who are going to be walking through, anybody who's going to have contact with it would need to be involved, even just for establishing what risks would be there. And then you can go through and find different ways of mapping them all out and then mitigating them and working through them with your team.
One of the questions I had is also, how long does it take to actually get a collaborative robot installed? So if I called you next week and said, hey, I'm very interested, what is the timeline now for deliveries?
You are looking at about 6 weeks or so currently. The last couple of years, it's been lower than that. But as everybody's finding now, there's some supply shortages. So we're probably about 6 weeks. There's a ton of material you get in the front end. So as we were saying before, you end up with CAD models, documentation, simulators, all of the online training. You can have that right away. So if it takes 6 weeks to get you a robot, you can have the rest of the work done on the front end. And from that point, on a relatively simple application, you can be doing something same day. On something a little bit more complex, you might be a couple of days. Some really tricky applications might take you a couple of weeks, but you'd work through, depending on what the application is, it can be very quick and you can be up and running probably from first call in about 2 months.
Nice. Bryce, in your experience, you purchased a dual Robotique end effector to handle and that was a really clever, right? Because you can have the finished one in the gripper and then putting in a raw puck into the CNC machine. How long did it take you to get your end effectors all ironed out?
Yeah, first, I just like one little addition to what you were asking, Matt, there, is just say that one of the nice things that we found with the UR robot was when we were trying to add safety, we wanted to add it, for example, we added a buzzer, so before it starts going, that was something that the staff just said, hey, it'd be really nice if it let us know, and even more so that it was going to start moving, and we had that wired in like an hour. Like, it was that easy, ordered it from McMaster-Carr, wired it in, and we were done. I mean, the ability to add inputs and outputs on those things is so easy. So I just, on the safety note, I just wanted to point out that was, something we quite liked about that. But yeah, as far as the dual gripper setup, I mean, it's really just bolt on. Like, it was just screwed on. I mean, the thing that actually kind of surprised me is, like, usually you see some sort of wires or something running along the robot, which can pick up on stuff or get caught or that sort of thing. I mean, with the grippers from Robotique, it was literally just plug it in, and then the dual gripper had a splitter, and we plugged in both grippers, and the software detected both of them right away, and we were going. It wasn't any real difference than setting up one gripper. The only real difference is I had to set up, 2 datums, one for each gripper. But again, it walks you through how to do that. Literally, like, picking up our blank and rotating the hand, and it figured out how much it weighed, where the center was, all those sorts of things were all automatic. So the dual gripper was great for us. I mean, so far we have done all those 7 parts that we've loaded, unloaded. We haven't had to change the loading gripper or the unloading gripper. We've been able to use the standard grippers, and we built a custom one for grabbing the bigger, heavier blank, and we don't have to change it out. So I mean, like our setup is swap the program and hit go. You know, it's that easy.
No, that's great. I wanted to switch up the presentation a little bit. Right now, I'm going to go back into slide share mode and share the presentation, and kind of show you the quick video as well. Are you seeing the right presentation, everyone? I wanted to show some of the peripherals that we have. So Robotique in Canada, we're very, very lucky. We've got a bunch of very sophisticated peripheral manufacturers, and these are plug and play products that UR connects to. So Robotique are the grippers that are on the end of the robot. RoboDK and RoboMaster are offline programming companies that are in the UR Plus store. And the UR Plus store, Chad, is a, can you maybe explain a little bit about either Matt or Chad about what the UR Plus store is?
Sure. It's a approved list of products that have gone through UR's process of verifying and confirming that they're going to work and integrate easily with a universal robot. And so something like a Robotique gripper, they've gone through, they've got mounting flanges that bolt up, the wiring is going to be easy, they've got software that loads right on to the robot, and you can be, as Bryce said, you can be up and running very, very quickly. That's not limited to grippers. You can have cameras, vision systems, you can have 7th axis. So they've got hardware and software that allows you to tie into and get the most out of a universal robot.
And like
sorry, go ahead.
And like you say, they're all plug and play, right? You don't need any special training. The software drivers are all integrated into the devices.
Yeah, yeah. And so it all comes as kind of a package. Many of these things are going to come with a little USB stick. You plug that right into the teach pendant, and you can be all the software will be there and allow you to integrate easily. The universal robots, they don't make a whole lot of them, right? There's very limited sizes. So you're going to go with a 3 kilogram up to a 16 kilogram, but they all run on the same teach pendant. They all run the same operating system. They all have the same tool flange. So if you pick a gripper that works for one robot, it's going to work for all 4 different sizes. So all of these things are incredibly versatile and allow you to take that same robot and do a lot of different things with it. And it's all going to be done through this app store, through this UR Plus program that allows you to know and be confident that something you're going to pick off of there is going to get you up and running quick.
So one of the things that we're talking about, and Chad and Bryce and Matt, please chip in on any of this. We are seeing a lot of different applications used in Canada. We're seeing packaging, we're seeing assembly. Chad, I think you mentioned that they're being used at in hospitals. What are some of the applications you're seeing that are pretty unique?
Yeah, just touching on hospitals and medical devices, we've seen some imaging kind of usage in terms of attaching cameras and whatnot for remote monitoring patients, or even remote servicing patients from a distance or from a safe barrier. As we've seen through COVID, it might not be practical to actually work on a patient. So, you know, we're seeing a little bit of collaborative robots used in that way. Yeah, the sanding and finishing, obviously a repetitive, repeatable process. I think we might talk a little bit later about the customer out in Toronto that is using that in an application. Woodworking, yeah, obviously sanding and the finishing, the polishing of spear boxes and whatnot are definitely an application.
One of the questions I put this bullet together about universities, and universities are using cobots for a whole bunch of different things. They're using it for training, they're using it for experimentation, for research. Have you got any glimpse on that window at all, Matt or Chad?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the same thing that was true for an end user with the availability of documentation and training is all true for universities as well. What makes it a really approachable product, and that anybody who wants 2 hours of online UR Academy can have it. The other really nice thing is you can get up close with these robots. That they're designed to be worked around. So something, you can have a benchtop robot with a gripper on top, and you can be interacting with it and actually reaching out and manipulating the robot. That allows you to learn and see in real time what the robot's doing and map it back into your process. There's a bunch of tools, like simulators are available, training's available, documentation's available. And another really nice thing for universities is out of the box, it's really approachable. You can have children using this thing, and in many cases, they're far more comfortable with it than you'd expect. But the back end is quite deep. So universities who want to use it for an entry first robot program, so Robot 101, that is all there and accessible. But for the back end, robot operating system support, ability to program with Python, there's a bunch of interfaces that allow you to actually get in and get into the back end of the robot and manipulate and work with it that way. The other nice part being that it all runs through the safety control board. So even while you're doing that, it still maintains a lot of the collaborative nature that allows you to work in and around it. It's a pretty neat machine.
So we talked a little bit about the UR Plus App Store, and I think it really is just these application kits that make it really, really fast and easy, tested, validated, and certified by UR. So they save end customers time and money, and really about risk. So there's 3 main pillars to this, right? It's plug and play in electrical and mechanical. They've got software and the documentation as well, which is really easy to go in. And we're going to talk about that towards the end of the presentation. But I did want to get Matt and Bryce and Chad talk a little bit about the application kit experience and kind of what is an application kit and what that means for you, and how does that save time and money. So Bryce, I'll pull you in for this one first.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, I'm not, don't have the experience and expertise of all of them like Matt would have, but I definitely have used the one that came with ours, and that was the machine tending kit from Robotique. When we bought the grippers with the dual gripper, it included the kit for their software, and for exactly what we're doing, which is machine tending, it's got it all figured out. So one way that we did it, if you've ever loaded a machine before by hand, you'll realize you kind of have to, you like to push it while it centers and make sure that it seats just right. Well, because they're collaborative robots and have force sensing, you can also utilize that force for what you want to do. So we actually pushed the blank into the chuck with the same force. We kind of calculated roughly what a person pushes it in with and did that. I'm sure that you could do that through like code or something like that, but it came with an app that just did that. So, it was just as simple as adding that extra, little line of code from the application into our program. And we were doing that sort of thing. We also built a table to drop our parts off ourselves. We might upgrade it in the future, but for now it's a pretty simple table. It's not perfectly flat. So when we go to pick a part up, we actually have it sense when it gets to the part and then grab it, versus just blindly going to a coordinate that may or may not be perfect because it's not flat and then introduce some sort of a problem. And those were all things that came in our Robotique machine tending kit, the finding surface features and those sorts of things, and they sped it up big time for us. So.
And Matt and Chad, you obviously have other customers who are buying and using other application kits, and what have their experiences been like?
Good, pretty much right across the board. All of these things are designed to really get you up to speed quick. Like something like the Robotique packages, the vast majority of these packages are going to run right on the robot. And the way I try and explain it to somebody is, if you have somebody who's particularly savvy both with the operation and with the robot, you can make a lot of these tools, but you're going through hours, hundreds of hours to try and design this stuff yourself. You're trying to either learn the new code, you're trying to design the mechanical interface, all of that stuff you can leverage somebody else's engineering. They've taken all those costs and all those hours, and they've spread that out across huge numbers of customers. And it makes it really accessible and really approachable for a customer to just say, no, this is what I want it to do. And it does that. So something like the Robotique sanding package, you can teach 4 corners, and the robot will generate all the paths, will allow you to do force control. You can have a number of configurable options in that. And that would take a long time for somebody who's really good at it to figure out. And out of the box, you can give this to somebody who's never played, not just with a sanding kit before, but with a UR before. And you can have them programming one of these applications in an hour. It's really neat. The back end of this is also quite deep, is they've gone from these small kits, so small tools, so something like a relatively simple vacuum gripper, integrating with a solenoid on or off, to a sanding kit, which ties in more tools and more software. They've got these full-on application packages now. So Robotique is a palletizing kit. That's one we've looked with. There's a number of outfits there that are doing palletizing, a couple of European companies, a couple of integrators in North America that are also doing it. But those are going to be a complete package that come with integrated slides, integrated tooling, software that's all going to map out. We work with a company called Vectus, and Vectus does welding applications. And so that's a robot integrated to a welder with all the software control and feedback built right into the system. So if you have somebody who knows robot welding, they could set that up themselves. But this is designed for people who've never really done robotic welding before. And again, they can be up and running, doing something relatively simple in an hour or two, and something more complex in a day, as opposed to being weeks of trying to get through the nitty-gritty of all this. And it's quite remarkable.
Basically, yeah, proven turnkey solutions ready to go, already programmed.
It just takes the risk right out of it.
Yep.
Actually, so here's a good on the Vectus product, which is a kind of self-contained welding application kit for small parts. If I'm a welder and I'm in Western Canada, say, how do I know that it's going to work? So I call you up, Matt, or I call you up, Chad, and say, hey, here's my part. What happens next?
So we partnered up with Vectus, and those guys are the experts. We spend a bunch of time with the UR robots and pretty comfortable with them. But they have a whole team of robotic welding experts. So the guys on staff design the code, design the system. So we get them on the phone and work through the process with them. So that would be a group call between them and a customer. Customer pull up a typical part. They'd work through what the restrictions would be, what the throughput would be, and they kind of go through the whole process of laying out a welding application for them and with them. You then look at whether or not it's a good application, different metrics that you'd find, different measurements that you'd see in a part, that they would know all the details as to whether or not it's a good fit or a good use case for the automation, and work through the whole process with them. And so, as you see with a lot of the UR partners, the UR Plus partners, is they've all got the expertise and they're all pretty accessible, and we have access to them. Anybody looking at UR has access to them, that you can kind of go through and really lean on the experts and then take advantage of their engineering and their turnkey packages.
And so the same thing, 6 weeks later, you have a robot, 7 weeks later, you're likely got the kit, and you can even do some pre-programming and away you go.
Yeah. And so these things are designed to run on the UR interface. So you're going to program a welding application with the same teach pendant that you use for machine tending or pick and place. It's really, really neat. It pops up, the software lives on the same teach pendant. You hit a button in the same way that slide that you're showing shows sanding application. There's a welding application that lives right on that same page.
Thank you for this. We're going to just stop the presentation for a moment, and I'm going to show you a quick video of an application. And let me know if you can see this okay, because I can't see what you see. So this is Ethelx in Montreal, and they're using a UR10 robot, and their main driver on putting in automation was a safety problem. They only had 6 feet of which they could use in front of their brake press. it freed up about 7 hours per day, and it cut the price of production. So in their industry, their product is shelving. It's made of steel. It's 60% of the cost of the automation. So they're able to have a 40% increase in sales. Automation was about safety. It was about being efficient. There were no layoffs, and they were able to pay back the robot in less than 12 months. You can see at the bottom right-hand side that there's a yellow sensor. It's a SICK motion sensor. You can see it just is activated. If somebody comes near the cell, it slows the robot to 20% of speed. So for them, it was time, it was money, and it was competitive pressures that allowed them to install a robot and have it save on their labor costs, but also made them more competitive in the industry. And you can see this on Universal Robots case studies. So I'm going to open back up my PowerPoint.
So just while you're doing that, you can see that that same package would have tool changers, would have safety sensors, all from the UR Plus platform, all tied back into that system.
So one of the things I wanted to also show our audience today is Universal Robots Robot Plus store. So this is just a small glimpse. There's, I think, around 250 or 300 different applications and hardware pieces that you can add to a robot. But I did want to talk before we end.
Jim, sorry again to interrupt. We've got the presenter or the notes mode again, if you just want to swap your display.
Okay.
Thank you.
So am I on the right slide? No, I'm not. So I wanted to talk about the UR Academy. So this is one of the couple of things to like about Universal Robots. They have been very innovative with their product. They've opened their API. So that means that any qualified, innovative company can add grippers or software. And one of the other really interesting things about Universal Robots, and one of the reasons I think that collaborative robots are great for the Canadian market, is this. It's their UR Academy. So it's an online training available at no charge. And Bryce, you can talk to this a little bit, right?
Before you do that, Bryce, sorry, Jim, could you just swap displays on your screen? It should come up.
Yes, let me swap displays. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you for that.
Great, thank you.
So I'll ask Bryce.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest with you, we didn't really have to use this. I mean, our application was quite simple. The UR applications that came with it were easy to use, and we kind of had it running in like a day or two. So I didn't have to really use this too much. So maybe Matt has more experience with it.
I throw it at everybody. Anybody who expresses any interest in UR, there's a series of links that you throw at them that say, and this is one. So whether or not they're comfortable themselves, it's a really neat tool that you can give to anybody. And it's very approachable. It's quite good. I know when I first got hired on here, it was part of the interview process. So I had done a little bit of familiarity with robots, but I was given this training the night before the interview and said, come on in. And part of the process was I was given a sensor and a robot, take it out of the box, wire it, plug it all in, and do a pick and place with the sensor. And it was about 40 minutes, having only used this training and never interacted with one of these robots before. It was very, very well done.
And one of the really interesting things about UR Academy, and it goes to the leadership position of UR, is that it's free. So there's no charge to learn about the robots. It's in multiple languages. It's all over the world. So you can become from an operator to a robot programmer in just a couple of hours of spending time on UR Academy. So another one of those pillar things that I really like about Universal Robots.
The simulator is there as well. So between the UR Academy and the UR simulator, both available free of charge, you can become very, very competent with one of these units without ever actually having to put your hands on a physical unit and get you and your team prepared.
Chad, I don't have your picture up here, but I want to thank the experts today and wanted to open the floor up to questions. So if we can just open that up and find out what questions we'd like to ask. So I have a bunch of questions. This question is, how have companies that have applied robots dealing with labor inspectors who may be expecting to see guarding around robots like this? So I think sometimes, even though you've got collaborative automation, you may want to have some guarding. Would that be true, Matt?
Yeah, each application will be different. So you find different applications where if you're swinging loads around somebody's head, if you're swinging parts around people's eye level, so palletizing applications that are swinging 20-pound boxes at shoulder level or head level may require guarding, but not all. And so each one of these, if you can show that you had a risk assessment done and that you've actually gone through to mitigate the risks that were there and were present, and you worked through all of those, then you should be okay. But again, it would be due diligence to go through any one of these applications. The robot is a tool, the work cell is automated, and the same thing that you'd go through with any new machine in any new facility. You'd want to work through those same processes with a robot.
In a less organized environment, how easy is it to integrate machine vision? Have you had some experience, Chad or Matt, doing machine vision and with universal robots?
Some of it's easy, lots of it's not. The UR Plus tools allow you to do 2D vision built right into the system. 3D vision is becoming more and more available, and they're getting heavier into full application packages for stuff like bin picking. So you can get applications where there's actually a UR package called ActiNav that does that. So it's automated bin picking. But Robotique is a solution. There's a number of partners that are doing it. You can get into robots holding 3D scanners. Like if you check out the UR Plus store, there's all kinds of tools that are available there. And then from the robot point of view, it would just be a matter of the robot provides the motion and the vision server would do everything else.
This question is from Mike, but it's for Bryce. For comparison's sake, assuming a cobot replaces a full-time person at minimum wage, kind of how long does it take for a cobot to become less expensive than the employee? Did you do a big ROI payback analysis, or did you just know this was kind of the right thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We aren't replacing a person, in that way. We were just wanting to, a big part of what we did is we've been keeping it running evenings and weekends. So historically, this job only ran from 6 a.m. To 2 o'clock, the end of our 2 o'clock shift, and then from 2 to midnight. So that meant every day from midnight till 6 a.m. it wasn't running, and then all weekend. Since we've put it in, we've actually had it running from midnight till 6 a.m. every single day. That 6 hours is very easy for us to do, and we've been able to get upwards of 13 or 14 hours on Friday night, and then throughout the weekend if somebody wants to pop in and throw more blanks onto it. And we're really shooting for at least 24 hours should be doable with our current setup, and if we go to a drawer system, maybe even getting all weekend. So, the ROI for us was more dependent on the increased productivity because our machine rates and stuff are just as high or higher than our labor, right? But just in the productivity increases, we freed up an entire machine. So, to free up an entire machine when you've got a shop that's only got 10 machines and 2 shifts, we're seeing a return in less than a year.
And one of the big challenges out there is that a lot of times in my conversations, we can't afford to let our staff go, right? Like we need to create technologies that are going to retain our staff, and we can put those other people up to much better jobs, let them anticipate and plan and do the things that people are really good at, and let robots do what robots are really good at. Here's a question. It says, have you ever worked with WorkSafe here in BC on any project where they could add their level of expertise on the application safety?
We haven't gone through that process with WorkSafe.
Okay. I think that probably will end our question part. I would like to, again, thank everyone for taking part of this. I wanted to also introduce some of the other integrators and distributors across Canada, as well as some of the providers that we're very excited to have. And I'd like to thank Manufacturing Automation and Annex Media for helping us put on this educational series of webinars, and of course, thank our sponsor, which is Universal Robots. Is there anything that we may have forgotten to talk about today, Bryce, Matt, and Chad?
No, I think we covered most of it. Check out the website. There is a ton of resources there, and there's a ton of resources that are freely available to you, to your staff, to your kids, like anybody who's interested. There's a lot of really good material.
Great. And I'd like to invite Christina back to the webinar for some closing comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. Great discussion today from all of you. I'd like to thank you, Jim, and of course our speakers. We have Bryce Flug of JS Foster Corporation, as well as Chad Skeens and Matt White at Skeens Pneumatic and Automation. You know, I thought all these stories were really great. One of the things that really came through today was the ease of integration and how end users can start looking at reassigning some of these triple D or dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs and enter the exciting world of collaborative automation. Thanks also to our sponsor, Universal Robots, for their support in putting together today's webinar. Please be sure to join Manufacturing Automation for the next 2 webinars in the Cobots in Canada series. There'll be a French language version on Wednesday, September 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern, and a Central Canada edition on Wednesday, October 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern, where you'll hear from some case studies in Ontario. A reminder that a recorded video of this presentation and discussion will be emailed to attendees over the next few days. And if we didn't get to your question, it'll be sent on to our panelists. Thanks everyone for your participation, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.